You have data everywhere, but is it working together? Meet Curator, the automotive industry's first unified intelligence engine. Curator unifies data from all corners of your dealership to transform marketing, sales, and customer interactions. See it today at goobagoo.com.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the third week in November 2025. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. We're breaking down some of the biggest stories in the auto industry from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. With me today, Omari Gardner is Director of Content and Commentary at Automotive News. Omari, welcome back to Weekend Drive.
Thanks for having me.
And Greg Layson is the digital and mobile editor of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada, and the host of the Automotive News Canada podcast. Good to have you back, Greg.
Good to be here.
So, Omari, you were down in North Carolina this week with Toyota to check out its massive plant in the town of Liberty, specifically its new battery facility. Before we talk about the big news of that visit, talk about the scale of that project and what stood out to you seeing it all in person.
So I've edited a number of stories about how big this facility is, but you really don't have no idea until you actually see it in person. I mean, it's this huge site in Liberty, North Carolina, and they're still in the middle of some of the construction. They have a couple of the buildings up that make hybrid battery cells and modules, but they're still working on I believe the plug-in hybrid and the building that builds EV batteries. So it's just an enormous site. One of Toyota's largest investments in the country, and just to see it in person is just something else.
While you were there, Toyota announced a $10 billion investment in new U.S. manufacturing. What's motivating Toyota to pour so much money into the U.S. lately? Is it tariffs, or is there more to the story?
Well, Toyota, has invested, nearly, including this investment, 60 billion since it, started manufacturing here 7 years ago. So it's continuing to invest. They have their build where you sell model, and we know this is their 11th factory in the U.S. So they really believe in building here in the United States because they sell so many vehicles here.
Any idea where this money is likely to go? We don't have many answers on that from Toyota.
No, and I spoke to people in the know, and they declined to specify what this money will be earmarked for. Needless to say, it's not a small investment at all. I imagine it will be done for multiple projects. The way they worded it was for future mobility, so we'll see what they do.
Meanwhile, GM made some big executive moves this week. Cadillac Global Vice President John Roth will take over as president of GM China. Replacing him at Cadillac is GM Canada President Christian Aquilina. Greg, what strikes you about these moves, and what does it mean for GM Canada?
The thing that struck me most was the timing. I mean, GM is under serious pressure and serious fire in Canada right now, having killed the Bright Drop electric commercial van line, which left thousands out of work in Ingersoll, Ontario. And so now it's almost rudderless at the top during a time in which the government of Canada, Unifor, the union which represents those workers, are all trying to negotiate with GM and try and find another product for that plant in central Ontario. I mean, I was just struck that they're going to leave this company, this arm, the Canadian arm, without a CEO in the short term. Now, Christian Aquilina is still responsible for Canada, but how involved is anyone when they're on the way out the door at any workplace? So it's really interesting in that sense that there's no real point person for General Motors in Canada right now. Now, they've done this before. When Marisa West left, it was also left vacant for several months toward the end of the year. So it's not something new. It's just something unique in that there is a lot of turmoil in the Canadian auto industry right now, particularly at GM in Ontario, and no one at the top is the point person.
Now, Greg, as you mentioned, GM has been in some hot water in Canada with manufacturing moves that leave its Cami plant in Ingersoll without product. What does that mean for whoever takes over this role next?
This is a difficult task at hand. Whoever comes in has to deal with an empty plant in Ingersoll, the renegotiation of the USMCA free trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico, It has to then deal in September of 2026 with contract talks, contract negotiations with Unifor, the union that represents the workers there. So there is a lot on the plate for whoever takes over GM Canada. In the short term, there is, as you mentioned, a lot of hot water, a lot of anger in the province and at the union. And there's really no one now to sort of absorb that at the top of GM Canada. It's just kind of left to be floating around in the ether.
Now, Greg, Unifor said this week that it would, quote, take over the plant if GM started moving equipment out. What's going on there?
Unifor is very upset. They think that they have a right and a contractual obligation to have product at that Cami plant. Remember, they moved the Equinox out. They brought Bright Drop in with great fanfare and great promise, and that product has been killed. And Unifor believes that GM is essentially in breach of contract by not having anything to produce there. And I'll read you the comment from Unifor. We have made our position with the company crystal clear. Nothing comes in and nothing goes out. If they try and remove even one single thing from the plant, we are ready to take over. We are not kidding. And they are not, because I can go back to 1996 and the CAW, which was the predecessor to Unifor, occupied a GM plant in Oshawa, Ontario to prevent GM from moving equipment out of that facility during a strike. Fast forward to 2019, the CAW occupied a supplier in Windsor, a Radco, where they made motor mounts. That's because that company lost its contract with, at the time, Chrysler, and were moving equipment out and moving the factories to the United States. So this is not unprecedented. I think GM should take this threat seriously. I can see it coming to that because I have seen it where I live. I recall union members being on the roof of that supply factory, planting a flag as if it were Omaha Beach or the moon landing, and literally taking over that factory. So this is something that Unifor is very serious about, and it's a card they would play.
Wow. Well, Amaro, you got any thoughts?
No, I think Craig described it perfectly. It's GM should take this threat seriously. It's the Canadian workers have just been, they've just been run through the ringer. Not just GM, but the Canadian auto workers in general. They've had so much turmoil, and they're looking for some stability. And the past few years have not provided it.
Wow. Well, coming up, we'll pivot to Nissan, which has some big plans to turn around its North American sales with products both new and old. That's next on Weekend Drive.
Your dealership has no shortage of customer information. But when that data is conflicting, messy, and spread across a multitude of platforms, it's impossible to activate properly. As the automotive industry's first unified intelligence engine, Curator enriches and unifies your customer data across platforms, like your CRM, your DMS, your website, and even your marketing efforts. It then injects that information back into your most vital systems to provide a single view of each customer and equip your sales team with the information they need to close a deal. When one of the largest volume Subaru dealers in the country wanted to tap into its data goldmine, they turned to Curator. In just 4 months, Huberger Subaru experienced a 55% higher closing ratio and a return of 15 times their investment. Want to see it for yourself? Check out the case study at goobagoo.com/curator. That's GUBAGOO.com/curator.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Kellen Walker with Omari Gardner and Greg Layson. Omari, now Nissan made a splash this week with CEO Ivan Espinosa telling our own Hans Greimel that the Japanese automaker is planning a blitz of new product next year to jumpstart U.S. sales. What do you make of this?
Well, it was a very interesting interview that Hans conducted with Espinoza. Espinoza seems to believe that accelerating their hybrid strategy in the U.S. is a key pillar of stabilizing their sales in the U.S. and increasing them next year. They're expecting sales to be flat this year and to rise next year. And I think the opportunities are certainly there. Again, the demand for hybrids as opposed to fully electric vehicles seems to be there in this market. Certainly, competitors have taken advantage of their hybrid lineups, and Nissan will like to do the same. They've also just introduced the redesigned Sentra, and affordability is such a concern in this country that there certainly is opportunity for an affordable small sedan to take some market share. Espinosa said that while sales are lower right now, that the quality of sales is better, and so they seem to be confident that there's some stabilization and even some growth opportunity over the next year. And this will, they're going to continue to expand their hybrid offerings into 2030. And they say that they'll be in the small, medium, mid-size, and large segments.
Now, Omari, how much is at stake for Nissan with this effort? If this doesn't significantly grow Nissan's market share in the US market, what then?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they have to get increased market share. They've had a strategy of chasing market share in the past, which is always it's had mixed results. But what they do need is our profitable sales. And again, I think the getting hybrids, that's where the market is right now. And getting those hybrids in market will be key to their profitability.
Now, speaking of Nissan, Greg, Nissan said this week that it plans to resume building its Pathfinder, Murano, and Frontier vehicles for Canada next spring. That's after a hiatus that began last May. What caused the production pause in the first place, and why are they restarting now?
So initially, Donald Trump put his tariffs on Canada-made vehicles, 25%. Canada responded in turn, but what Canada did is allow the Detroit 3, Honda, and Toyota a reprieve from those tariffs so they could import vehicles as long as they continue to build here. And so obviously, automakers like Nissan don't build here, so their imports were subject to the 25% tariff, and those products are built in the southern United States. And so when those tariffs came online, Nissan had, prior to that, hearing that this was coming, built up inventory in Canada and let it run out. And they are significantly down in inventory now heading into the fall and winter. So they're going to need to replenish that stock at some point. I fully expect there to be almost zero of those products on dealer lots early in 2026, but production and importation is set to resume in the spring, maybe around April, May ish. And then here's the interesting thing to me. They will bring those popular vehicles back, but there will be a thinned lineup on the Pathfinder. They will eliminate the two lowest priced models for Canada. And I suspect this is a way to make higher margins to pay for those tariffs because they don't make as much money on the two entry level trims of that Pathfinder. So you're really seeing automakers now try and count the beans, if you will, and make the money where they can. And if there's no money to be made on lower trims, or as Omari mentioned, a small sedan or something like that, they may not end up in Canada. There might not be a full portfolio, at least for Nissan and perhaps other automakers, if they can't make the money on the lower end vehicles. They're going to import what they can make money on. And this reminds me of coming out of the pandemic, or during the pandemic and during the microchip shortage, where automakers were really focusing on the vehicles that were high margin because they could sell them, still make a lot of money, and not have to worry about the lower end vehicles. So it's going to be a really interesting spring and an interesting 2026 model year in Canada to see what is actually produced in America and sent to Canada for sale.
Interesting stuff. So, guys, before we end, I'll be heading to California next week for the LA Auto Show. Anything you guys are interested in hearing about from LA? Any tips on things I should make sure to check out?
One of the more interesting things will be the next generation Kia Telluride. It's in its second generation. We know that it was a runaway success for Kia, the first generation when it debuted. So we'll see how it has evolved for the second one.
For me, I'm always interested in the products we manufacture in Canada, and in particular, the minivan. And that is a segment that was born and bred almost exclusively in Windsor, Ontario, by Lee Iacocca. I know there are some refreshments coming for that minivan. It is a point of pride for that automaker and for Canadian auto workers. So if there is any development on the Chrysler Pacifica, I am always interested in that, in particular, that model. And then, of course, anything that has to do with Honda or Toyota, because for those that don't know, the RAV4 is only made in Canada. And I'd like to say our automakers and auto workers probably want to keep that the case. So any updates to any model made in Canada is always of interest to our readers and our listeners.
Perfect. Omari, Greg, thank you so much for joining me.
Anytime.
Yep.
That's all for this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on manufacturing, executive moves, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. If you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.